Know that there are, these areas of big existential struggle between these two superpowers that can't be solved. So in terms of what Yellen has gotten out of this trip, does it meet the managed expectations that we had going into it?
I think so. They did have one little announcement for us. I would not call it a major announcement, but they did spring an announcement on Saturday after she met with He Lifeng, the vice premier. That's when they announced basically more talks, but specifically focused. They'll have a new set of talks specifically focused on this overcapacity issue, or as they euphemistically talked about it, economic balancing. And I suppose that's progress of a kind. In a greater sense, though, we were not expecting, of course, big announcements. We didn't get them. And it's going to really take time before we can gauge China's reaction to the quite severe criticism that Yellen gave them last Friday in Guangzhou. She really hit them over the head on this overcapacity issue. They did not fire back, either publicly or, and I'm told after speaking to some senior members of the Treasury delegation in the private meetings, they didn't really hear any heated pushback, anything really angry over Yellen's comments. The Chinese have clearly decided to continue treating her very politely. They've gone on through all the ceremonial aspects of the visit. There's no hitches there. She met with the premier, as you mentioned. The question really that still hangs over this is her push going to move the needle in Beijing in terms of how they allocate capital in their economy. The U.S. says they're putting way too much into supply that's going to end up in distorting global markets rather than into demand. Are the Chinese going to consider this and change? I would say that's certainly unlikely in the short term, and we won't know for a while whether they might make an adjustment or they're just nodding politely and kind of waiting to see what happens in the next U.S. election, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make, because I do wonder to what degree has the respect that Janet Yellen has enjoyed in China on this visit a measure of the personal respect she seems to have secured in China. What happens if this is her last visit as Treasury Secretary? How does this relationship potentially look in 2025 with Janet Yellen no longer there to sit around the table?
Well, that's a huge question. Does the benefits of Janet Yellen only accrue to Janet Yellen, or does it accrue to the United States of America? Certainly, if we have a change of administration, you'll see big changes. There will be no continuity. But if the Biden administration carries on with the second term and there's a new Treasury Secretary, I think some of this will carry over. Yellen is working, I must say, very hard to make sure that the ties they're building with economic policymakers in China go deep into the staff level on really workaday issues, from financial stability to exchanging economic data. The U.S. doesn't have a great view into transparent Chinese data. So they're working hard on these things. It's fair to say that probably that has a good chance of continuing on. But at the highest level, in terms of influencing senior policymakers in Beijing, the next Treasury Secretary may have to begin afresh.